Ronald Joseph DeFeo Jr., aka Butch, is an American mass murderer. Ronald was born on September 26, 1951 in Brooklyn, New York City. He was tried and convicted for the killings of his father, mother, 2 brothers, and 2 sisters on November 14, 1974. He is currently 65 years old and is held in the Sullivan Correctional Facility in the town of Fallsburg, New York. On Wednesday, November 13, 1974, around 6:30 p.m., then 23-year-old Ronald Jr. went to Henry's Bar in Amityville, Long Island, New York, and declared, "You got to help me. I think my mother and father are shot." A small group of people went into 112 Ocean Avenue, which was located near the bar, and found that Ronald Jr.'s parents were indeed dead. One of the people in the groups was Ronald Jr.'s friend Joe Yeswit, who made an emergency call to the Suffolk County Police, who searched the home and found that all 6 members of the same family were dead in their beds. All of the victims had been shot around 3 o'clock in the morning of that day with the .35 caliber level action Marlin 336C rifle. According to Suffolk County Police, the victims were all found lying on their stomachs in bed. Both of the parents had been shot twice, while all the children had been killed with single shots. Physical evidence suggests that Louis DeFeo and her daughter Allison were both awake at the time of their death. The family had occupied 112 Ocean Avenue since purchasing it in 1965. The deceased were later buried in nearby St. Charles Cemetery in Farmingdale. Ronald Jr. was taken to the local police station for his own protection after suggesting to police officers at the scene of the crime that the killings had been carried out by a mob hitman, Luis Fellaini. The alleged hitman had an alibi proving Fellaini was out of state at the time of the killings. However, an interview at the station later exposed serious conflicts in his version of events. On the next day, he confessed to carrying out the killings himself. He had taken a bath and redressed, telling details where he had discarded crucial evidence like blood-stained clothes and the Marlin rifle and cartridges before arriving to work as usual. Ronald Jr.'s trial began on October 14th of 1975. He and his lawyer William Weber mounted to an affirmative defense of insanity, claiming that he killed his family in self-defense because he heard their voices plotting against him. DeFeo's psychiatrist, Dr. Daniel Schwartz, supported the insanity plea for defense, and the psychiatrist for prosecution, Dr. Harold Zolan, presented that although Ronald Jr. was an abuser of heroin and LSD, he had an antisocial personality disorder and was aware of his actions at the time of the crime. DeFeo was found guilty on November 21, 1975 on 6 counts of second-degree murder. Later on December 4, 1975, he was sentenced to 6 concurrent life sentences of 25 years. All of his requests to the parole board have been denied. DeFeo has an unstable relationship with his father, but the motive for the killings remains unclear.
Oh shit.
This is the Weird Shit Podcast.
Is that a joint, man?
And I wouldn't flaunt your ignorance.
Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace.
Watching the news a little while ago, and they said that I don't know if you guys saw, but earlier this week Trump was tweeting about that Chinese electronics company ZTE, and how he needed to help save that company because it's it would save so many jobs for China and stuff, which is weird that he gives
why does
shit
he care about China all of a sudden?
About Chinese jobs, right? I was like, that's fucking weird. And ZTE specifically, the reason they're in so much trouble is because our intelligence agencies suspect that they have been putting like listening devices into the electronics that they sell as like a method to like spy on people. And but anyway, he's like, oh, I need to help ZTE, I need to save their jobs, etc. Literally like maybe 5 minutes before we decided we were going to start recording, I saw a report that just came out that says that China has donated $500 million to some sort of property that Trump's company is building in Thailand.
Oh, good.
$500 million. Like,
It's a small loan.
half a billion dollars. And I was like,
Still, still his self-made property.
yeah, it's his self-made property. I was like, man, that's such a weird coincidence that he suddenly gives a shit about this huge Chinese company when...
Money.
And then he gets $500 million. Welcome to Weird Shit Podcast. This is Mike.
What's up?
What the fuck was that?
Huh?
I don't even know where I am anymore.
Podcast. This is Ryan.
Cinnamon twist tie.
Palmer with the cinnamon twist.
This is Jif Peanut Powder. 85% less fat.
It's got less fat than regular peanut butter because it's powdered peanut butter.
Exactly.
So, of course it would. What you do is you lay it in a line and then you snort it off of your toast.
I would too.
So, first things first, I guess I'll start us off by getting into the weird news stories of the week. Beep, 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 beep.
Oh wait, no.
Weird shit.
Whoa! So the first one I have here is actually another Michigan Dogman sighting. I don't know if you guys remember a couple weeks ago I was talking about the Michigan Dogman.
I do not.
So
Dog Michelin Man?
So this person says, bear with me here because I'm trying to paint a mental picture for you.
Bear with me.
Mental
it's
is in like
dog person.
out there, or like trying to. You know,
They're
what I mean?
American, so I'm sure they meant like
I'm trying to paint
picture
a
in your
mental
brain.
picture. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me paint you a mental song.
It's like Brad Pitt. No. What? I guess I should start by saying that the only people who know about this is my immediate family, my fiance, who's encouraged me to contact you, and the person who witnessed this with me. This happened back in 2001. I was only 8 years old at the time. My friend who was with me at the time was 7. We were both very small. I remember it was early August, and I lived in a semi-inner city in Michigan, next to a very large park. At the time, my friend and I had decided it was a great idea to play in my very big backyard at night, because the neighbors had a bonfire going. It just barely lit that portion of my yard, just like raving.
No, they're summoning the dog man.
Oh shit, that could be it too.
Hey, Dog Man.
Hey, dog man!
They're all just running in a circle going,
Oh!
Wakanda forever.
Man, my neighbors are weird. I don't know why they're screaming about dog people. So, it just barely lit that portion of my yard. Just barely lit that portion of my yard through a bunch of trees. They're like peeing on each other, sniffing each other's butts. We had climbed onto the shed via the neighbor's fence and a propped board. I mention this because it's nearly impossible to climb to this day, being an adult. I can send size comparison photos if you'd like, banana included. Anyway, we had our feet dangling off of the shed, with our backs facing toward the park. And without a word, my friend had jumped off the highest part of our shed. Which we were never able to do.
Just Band-Aid.
Yeah, just Band-Aid it. I was like, that is the longest fart I've ever heard in my life. Chug.
It's Mellow Yellow. Give us money.
Send us money, Mellow Yellow. I don't think any of them's working. Yeah, my bong doesn't work either. Let's see. And without a word, my friend had jumped off the highest part of our shed. off the highest part of our shed,
meters.
which we were never able to do. I mean, he practically flew and headed straight for the house.
I still keep thinking to myself, like, in the middle of the day, about that one guy who's, like, writing about how good of a writer he is.
Yeah. I'm a very skilled writer.
I was like, just taking a piss at work, and I'm like, I'm rather a good writer.
I'm a rather good peer. I do it at least twice a day.
I think at this point I've mastered the craft.
Sometimes.
So his friend practically flies. After a long few seconds, I turned around to see why he ran, and there was this thing. It looked half dog and half human. There's really no other way to describe it. It had to have been over 8 feet high, and its reaching length was over 4 feet.
It was high.
Its ears alone had to have been a foot long at least, and its eyes did that thing a cat's eyes do when light reflects on them in the dark. Its hand was inches away from my ankle. Very, very hairy body. It was basically a dog. I don't exactly remember the color of it, if it even had a color, but I do remember that whatever this was standing from the ground because we didn't have a chain link fence. It was all parallel wood that you couldn't stand on, and it was massive. So tall that I could see from its middle torso and up. That was literally the fastest I've ever rolled away. I don't even remember how I got down. Ran inside and told our parents. We had no idea what it was at the time, so I vaguely remember telling my mom there was a tall man outside with a very hairy arm and big ears.
All I heard was, that was the fastest I ever rolled away, and I just see someone going, "Oh shit, a dog man," and just starts rolling.
Stop, drop, and roll.
Does
not
the Sonic the
running or
Hedgehog
anything.
thing
Just
like charges up? Just like instantly back into the house.
Meet.
But yeah, so that's that person's story. The next one I have here is let's see. It's octopuses came to Earth from space as frozen eggs millions of years ago.
Yeah. Fucking xenomorphs.
Which is pretty fucking dope.
I knew it.
But apparently, scientists now think that octopuses came here as cryopreserved eggs via a process known as panspermia.
Is it octopuses or is it octopi?
It says octopuses.
I believe it's octopotami.
Octopuses?
It's
Octopiece.
Hypnosis masseuse.
octopus.
Octopus.
Spaceus autobus.
It's an octopus. The genome of the octopus shows a staggering level of complexity with 33,000 protein-coding genes, more than is present in Homo sapiens.
Yeah, it's octopods because it's Greek.
Sweet.
That's people often mistake it for octopi, following Latin rules, but since it's of Greek origin,
It would be
octopods.
okay.
Anyway, but in today's English, it's octopuses. So
Yeah. Squiggly bits.
Its large brain and sophisticated nervous system, camera-like eyes, flexible bodies, instantaneous camouflage via the ability to switch color and shape are just a few of the striking features that appear suddenly on the evolutionary scene. So, like, literally, they're like, this thing doesn't really make sense in evolutionary, like, lines until it shows up. Like, it shows up, and then it evolves from, like, being an octopus, but they're like, that's fucking weird that happened. So they suspect it might be because they're like, they were on like frozen eggs on like an asteroid or something that smashed into the planet, which is pretty dope. But that also reminded me of that story I was telling you guys
was the asteroid
before.
also in it?
it was
Maybe
the
it was a
sperm hitting
giant
the
egg.
Earth.
So
Impregnated the Earth.
Makes sense.
Made humans.
So that actually had reminded
trees.
me of that story that I had told you guys before about the Russian like Arctic crew that like got attacked by the killer like shape-shifting vampire squid thing. And I was like, maybe that's what the octopus is supposed to be, is that like shape-shifting vampiric murdering Russians thing.
I'm glad they're not.
Yeah, so it's a good thing they're not now.
I'm gonna have to fuck them up.
Dude, if octopuses had like a sound, you think it would be like a bird because they got beaks?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like to imagine it'd
They
be
just
something
jump
along
out of
lines
the water and go, caw!
So,
oh god, octopods!
It sounds just like a fucking little tiny finch, just beep, 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 beep.
so like, oh shit.
You're like, oh, that sounds cute. You turn around, it's like a giant fucking like shredded octopus.
Just fucking like John Cena levels of jacked. No fucking neck on this octopus. Just like straight muscle octopus.
That's why I don't eat seafood.
Because one day they're gonna find out. They're gonna be mad. I've eaten a lot of sushi, so
They're coming after you.
if there's any octopods listening to this podcast, miss me with that revenge shit.
What's more dangerous, an octopod or a Tide Pod?
Depends on whether the octopod is alive when you eat it or not.
What color is the octopod?
Can you put an octopod in your washing machine?
It'll turn everything black.
Just because it'll freak the fuck out.
Help you keep your blacks black.
They should actually come out with something like that. That'd be a great
just little
advertisement.
octopuses you
It's
put in
little
your
tiny
washing machine.
octopus-shaped Tide Pods filled with octopus ink to turn everything black. How to keep your blacks black to really separate the colors.
The problem is they also mix that
As
ink.
they should be.
They also mix that ink with mucus, and so it's gonna be like you're pulling out like old dried crusted boogers out of the fucking.
It's
Out of your
sponsored
dryer.
by Black Lives Matters. It's just like keep your blacks black.
As all things should be.
Tired of bleaching all your clothes.
Don't bleach your blacks.
Introducing Tide Pods Octopods.
Tides octopods.
Also edible. Also, they're not.
Also, no. Don't
Also,
eat these.
please don't eat them. That's a very bad idea.
Just like a little tiny like disclaimer at the bottom. It just says no memes, please.
So,
Shotgun no memes.
so if you guys remember from the our Japan episode, I was talking about Aokigahara Forest, which is the Japanese suicide forest. I found an article today which is about a bunch of different haunted forests from like around the world, which is pretty cool. Like there's the Isla de las Muñecas in Mexico, or the Island of the Dolls, which is a fun little picture of that there.
Nope.
Basically, some little girl had apparently drowned there, and the caretaker of the island started hanging dolls on the island as a way to appease the girl's spirit, and now there's hundreds on
I
this
guess
little
she's
island.
not appeased.
Apparently it's haunted as shit.
She's pissed.
Like, I saw an episode of Ghost vs. Bros where they went here, and, like, Zach Bagans is, like, fucking, like, weeping like a child. Like, as he's walking through, he's like, oh my god, this is so scary! Like, because he's, like, terrified of clowns and dolls are, like, his two biggest fears. So, he was, like crying. He was so scared on this island. And some of them, like, I think they got, like, footage of, like, one of them moving on its own and shit. I'm like, nope.
Nope. Isla de Nope.
The next one I have here is the Hoai Bashiu Forest in Romania, which apparently is a haunted forest in the Transylvania region.
Yeah, I just assume any forest in that general area of the world is going to be haunted.
Which is mostly known for being a place where a military technician photographed a UFO in 1968.
It's known as a forest where Romanians live.
Apparently, in this clearing where the guy saw the UFO, nothing grows or has ever grown in that clearing, and it's like weirded out scientists forever because like they like can't get shit to grow there. And also the trees that are there grow in a spiral pattern, which is really strange.
I believe
like
most
the trees of the
recently
forest.
they had a bunch of scientists gather around that patch of Earth, and they just screamed, "Grow!"
And it didn't work
It didn't
somehow.
work.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
You'd think that would do it.
Usually works.
There's also the Black Forest in Germany, which is said to be like proud by everything from witches to werewolves to like vampires and shit. I've never been, but it looks really spooky in all the pictures I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like,
that's a pretty huge forest, also.
yeah, like it's straight out of Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters. Like that forest is like the Black Forest. So, there's the Devil's Tramping Ground right here in North Carolina, where apparently a UFO landed and created the Magdalene Crystal Column of Energy, whatever that is. And apparently there's this circle where nothing at all ever grows, and it's said that the devil comes out at night to play in that circle.
Sweet, you can go party with the devil.
Where is this?
I'm way too high to drive to the devil's house. It's here in North Carolina.
But where?
Chatham County.
That's not that far from here. I'm pretty sure that's like one county over. I think that's where Chapel Hill is, right?
Should we not tell everyone where we live?
Chatham.
We live in county.
We live in county, North County.
Dude, yeah, that's like super
Counties
close.
of
USA.
states.
It is not close to us at all.
I live in
We are
Canada.
in the opposite direction
It's
from
like
wherever
5
that
minutes
thing
from
is.
here. What are you talking
We
about?
are so far away from that thing that's not even close.
A house in Amityville, New York, carries the heavy burden of being one of America's most infamous haunted houses, allegedly. And now, for the first time in 40 years, the boy who lived there is now a man and breaking his silence. Trace Gallagher has the story. Trace?
His name is Danny Lutz, Megan. He's 47 years old now. His parents bought the Amityville Horror House back in 1976. They bought it 13 months after a 23-year-old man shot and killed his parents and his 4 younger siblings. The Lutz family claims as soon as they moved in, it started. Jolting sounds at night, objects flying across the house, green slime oozing from the walls, kids levitating above their beds. Danny Lutz says he hasn't talked about it in 37 years, but the stories are true. Listen.
The house at 112.
When I went in there was probably 400 or 500 flies. And we're talking, this is mid-December in Long Island. The entire family is standing there watching the garage door slam up and slam down, and the dog is hanging himself.
Yeah, Lutz believes his stepfather, George, that man who bought the house at a steep discount, actually brought this upon the family because before they moved in, he dabbled in the occult. Listen.
Satanic history, devil worship, mind control. I was possessed by a spirit that I could not get rid of on my own. I didn't care if the priests were beating me, performing exorcisms on me, which, if I'm not mistaken, they don't want to talk about.
Now, there have been many skeptics over the years, including a lawyer who says he helped the Lutz family dream this whole story up for profit, and others who say the family has no samples of green slime, they have no pictures, they got no proof at all. This documentary, by the way, Megan, trying to disprove that, saying if you watch it, you will be a believer. You can download it if you want. It's available as we speak.
I watched it. I don't know if I'm
Did
a
ya?
believer. I don't know if I'm a believer. Doug fell asleep. Okay. gotta leave it at that. He scares easy. Thanks, Trace.
So, I don't know if you guys have been keeping track of this as much as I have.
Nope.
But this week is our 50th episode.
Hey-o.
What? Yeah. We've officially made 50 of these. So, suck it.
Suck it, everyone who said we'd never make it to 50.
Yeah, they're like, well,
Who
we'll
said
never make
that?
50.
Who said this?
Assholes.
Joaquin.
People who were wrong.
Joaquin.
He's the guy I buy meth from. Joaquin.
You guys will never get to 50 episodes.
Fuck you, Joaquin. I can do whatever I put my mind to.
That's why he's in a dumpster.
Fuck him.
He's alive. He just lives there.
Damn it. So today I wanted to do something kind of extra special and kind of spooky since it's our 50th episode. So today we're going to be covering the Amityville Horror. Have you ever heard of Amityville, Palmer?
Isn't that a movie?
Yeah, it is a movie.
Maybe it's 2 movies.
Yeah, it's at least 8 movies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that the
Freddy Krueger movies?
9, 10.
I believe those are the Chang Dynasty.
It is 15 movies.
Oh, so then it's the Saw movies. Got it.
And those are just the ones in the official Amityville franchise. That's not even the ones that are like spin-offs or like documentary series and shit like that. Basically, this is the most famous haunted house in America. Is basically what the Amityville house is.
Why is it so haunted?
We're gonna get into that for sure.
It's because of ants?
Flies.
Damn.
They got a lot of flies.
That's not as fun.
So,
all you gotta do to take care of flies is put out a little dish with some apple cider vinegar.
Yep.
A couple drops of dish soap.
Yep.
No more flies. I mean, it'll be full of flies, but
then you just have to like set up a little tripwire trap with a giant fly swatter.
Now you just
and then you walk through it because you forgot you put it there. Because why would a fucking fly trip a trap like that and then it just hits you in the face, and then you get mad, and then
all the flies in that little dish you just pour it into a skillet, fry it up a little bit, eat it, die because there's dish soap in it.
There's Tide Pods in it.
So the Amityville Horror comes from the title of the book. The Amityville Horror.
Is it from Amityville?
Yeah, it's in
written by John Amityville.
It's actually written by Jay Anson.
Oh, ants! I knew it had something to do with ants.
You're just picking up shit from the universe at this point.
My name's Horror.
Jansen.
Bob Horror.
That's his name. Jay Anson. Jansen.
Jansen.
What's his
My
first?
God. Eric Jansen. It's written by Derek Jansen.
It's written by Dokken.
Fuck you, Dokken. So, this book was released in September of 1977, and it's supposed to be based on the claims of the Lutz family, who are the people that lived in this house.
It's actually written by Amy DeVille.
Amy DeVille?
Amy DeVille.
Get over here, Amy.
Get over here, Amy.
I got a case of the haunted.
Oh, we're hunting now.
Amity.
Amity, get in this house. So, like spews flies out of her throat. So,
is the Mummy a part of this franchise?
Eldritch Horror, you're grounded.
She just turns into sand.
So, before I get too much into the Lutzes, I want to start off with the DeFeos. So, who are the DeFeos, you ask?
DeFeo. DeFeo.
So,
me say DeFeo.
DeFeo, they did as
me
fuck.
Me say DeFeo.
So the DeFeos.
This is actually how the haunting story goes.
It's just us just pissing them off. So, early evening, November 13th of 1974, a bunch of people, they're sitting around Henry's Bar, which is a tavern apparently located on Merrick Road and Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York. And they're like hanging out, they're talking, they're like, yeah, it's good living in Amityville. Amityville's a dope ass place. And bam, 6:30, this dude like kicks in the fucking door. He's like, you gotta help me. I think my mother and father are shot. And everybody's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And it's Ronald DeFeo Jr., who everybody called Butch. That was like his nickname. So they're like, Butch, what the fuck? Like, what do you mean your parents are shot? And this guy, Bobby Kelsky, he was like Butch's best friend, and he's like he like runs over and like Butch DeFeo is like on his knees like weeping in the floor of the bar, and his friend like runs over and is like, hey man, like come on, like talk to me, what do you mean your parents are shot? And Butch is like, Bobby, you gotta help me, somebody shot my mother and father. He's like, are you sure they're not asleep? He's like, nah, I saw him up there. And so Bobby agrees to go with him to go look at the house. So when Bobby agrees to go, a bunch of other people agree also, including John Altieri, Joey Yesvoit, Al Sexton, William Scortamaglia. Scortamaglia.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that guy's at the heart of this.
That guy is the owner of Henry's Bar.
I feel like he's also the person that haunted that house.
He's also a necromancer.
Yeah.
Has to be.
Some sort of blood magus or necromancer.
I am Scortamaglia! At last I can get to the Eye of Karash!
Revenge!
Revenge will be mine, He-Man! So they get to the house, and Butch is like the house at 112 Ocean Avenue. And it's like this 3-story Dutch colonial home that was built in like 1925. It's like that spooky one you see on the covers of anything to do with Amityville, where like the front windows look like fucking eyes, like evil eyes staring at you. It's a really spooky looking house. And it sits on this long, narrow lot. So anyway, they pull the car up, and Bobby's like, everybody be quiet, somebody might still be in there. And then Butch like is like, I don't care, and like goes in anyway, like goes running back into the house. They
splatter.
The house was quiet except for the barking of Shaggy, the DeFeo sheepdog, who was tied up to the inside of the kitchen's back door.
Just hear like it's like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. Just
barf. Roof. What would a sheepdog sound like? It'd be like barf.
Correct.
Shut. Brat. Shut. Bah. Shut. So they can hear him in the kitchen.
Is that Birdman?
Apparently, because the dog wasn't like totally housebroken, they like kept him tied up in the kitchen all the time. And so while they're in there, Bobby Kelsky takes the lead, and they go upstairs to the second floor.
This way.
Bobby had been there like a million times before, so he knew like where the master bedroom was. And so he's like, follow me. And as they get to the second floor, they just get hit with this like stink, like the smell of death, like just hits them all at once. And so
smells like victory.
So Bobby stops at the doorway to the master bedroom, and he hits the light switch, and he can see Ronald DeFeo and his wife Louise DeFeo laying on the bed, and there's a hole in the center of Ronnie DeFeo's Ronnie DeFeo Sr., because Ronnie DeFeo Jr. is the one that shot everybody.
The DeFeos are on the bed.
And they're dead. So there's a hole through the center of his back, like his bare back. And they're like, wake up, sleepyhead. But
okay?
They're like, no, he's not alive anymore. And like blood had like trickled out of the wound and was now at this point dried up, disappearing beneath his blue boxer shorts. And Louise DeFeo, her wound wasn't like immediately, like they didn't see it immediately because she was like buried beneath an orange blanket. Like she had like grabbed a blanket to like try to protect herself or something.
She was shot in the butt.
So, and like behind their bed, they had like a mirrored wall, which is really fucking creepy to begin with anyway.
It's kind of all you have when you want to get shot.
So, as they make their way through the house, they find his two brothers, the bodies of his two brothers, face down like their parents. In the bed on the left was John DeFeo, who was 9, and on the right was his brother Mark DeFeo, who was 12. Next to the bed was a pair of crutches and a gray wheelchair, because the kid had been hurt in football recently, and so he had to use these. And
For murder?
after they saw those kids, they called 911, and it ends up being the whole family. The whole DeFeo family was killed. It's like a 6-person family. And this guy, Ronnie DeFeo Jr., or Butch DeFeo, he's like, oh, it was a hitman that did it. Like, a hitman came in and killed them all. And they're like, a hitman killed your family? And he's like, yeah, totally. And then he's like, and after that, he changed his
man.
His name was
Hitman.
His name was Durrani Feo.
No, damn it.
No, that's too obvious. I can think of something better.
Not Ronnie.
His name was
not Ronnie
DeBeo. His name was Dolph Lundgren. No, wait, that's not it.
So, what had happened is whoever had killed the family had gone from room to room with a lever-action rifle and managed to kill every person in the house without waking any other person in the house, which is...
Oh, that doesn't sound right.
Kind of weird, because, how would you not wake up to... Bang!
He had that
then
giant,
clink, clink,
trash
clink.
can silencer on it, like in No Country
Bang.
for Old Men.
Well, here's the thing. There was no evidence that he even knew what a silencer was, much less had one, because he's not
That doesn't really make it
a
any
very
quieter
smart guy.
anyway. It only reduces the decibel by 30.
He's not a very smart guy. So the police were like that's something that even the coroner was completely baffled by, because the coroner's none of these people have defensive wounds. None of them are
no evidence of being drugged.
Yeah, no evidence, no drugs in their system, nothing. No weird signs of oh, they had higher than normal carbon monoxide exposure or anything like that either. It's literally they were asleep and somebody went to every single room, some of which had 2 people in the bed, and managed to kill all of them with a lever-action rifle without them waking up. Which is nuts. They have to be the heaviest sleeping-ass family in the world.
Did he say he shot them, or could he just beat the shit out of them with it?
They were shot.
Okay.
They were shot for sure.
Now, was there a storm that night? Was he enemy at the gatesing them? Waiting for the
timing the thunderclaps? Timing it with the thunderclaps? Yeah, maybe. See, the problem is some places are it was a dark and stormy night, and you're well, this is a haunted house story, so
of course it
was it really a dark and stormy night?
House,
or
so the storm was inside the house.
Yes.
The storm was coming from inside the house.
And so there's several different theories as to what happened to them. Some people are oh, it was the mob. Oh, it was Ronnie himself did it, and stuff like that. But what's weird is just the fact that they didn't wake up.
Suicides.
Yeah.
I think
they all committed suicide, shooting themselves in the back while they were sleeping.
I think he had that
with lever action rifles. They just threw away all 6 of the lever action rifles.
I think he's just able to stop time.
Yeah.
It's Zach Morris killed his family from Saved by the Bell because he would like stop time all the time on the show. People who have seen Saved by the Bell are loving that joke because that is solid material.
I haven't seen that in such a long time. I didn't remember he could stop time.
Yep. He would like just stop time and then like walk to the camera to like say something, and then he would like start it back up again. So
there's a time made.
Just like stop time, and that's when I shot them.
Yeah,
and
just
it goes
kills
back.
like the whole family, just making direct eye contact with the camera the whole time. You're like, holy shit! Jesus, Zach Morris. So
he's doing it.
So this guy goes through the house. Whole family's dead. He gets charged with their murder because they're like, obviously he fucking did it. So he's convicted. He's in prison.
Set up.
And years later, we get to the Letts family.
His fingerprints were all over the house. He had to do it.
You lived there.
No. You don't touch things when you live somewhere.
It's being framed.
That's right.
I know. I levitate around the house to keep from touching things because I don't want my fingerprints.
I'm technically just wearing a latex bodysuit that you guys can't see.
I am technically a psychic projection, and Mike has been dead for about 20 years.
Damn, some Luke Skywalker shit.
Minutes of right now. Back in November 1975, 6 people were killed in an awful mass murder. I know it's got to be awful in a small town on Long Island. The town is called Amityville. The murders took place in this house. 1 year later, George and Kathleen Lutz bought the house and they moved into it with their 3 children. After living there for 28 days, they were convinced the house was possessed by some kind of evil force, and they left their belongings and they fled, and they were really terrified. The events that supposedly took place there during those 28 days have been put down in a best-selling book. It's called the Amityville Horror, and there is now a movie out, or about to come out, of the book. George and Kathleen Lutz are with us this morning to talk about what happened during those 28 days in Amityville. And James Brolin, super young man, actor.
Thank you.
Yes, much pleasure. Good to see you again, Jim. He plays George Lutz in the movie, and Jim is with us this morning, and it's great seeing you again.
Great seeing you again.
Lutzes, good morning to you both.
Good morning.
All right, first of all, the book and the movie depict all these kind of weird, strange things that happened in the house during those 28 days when you were there. What kind of things, George, happened physically? What were some of the things that happened that scared you?
Well, at first, just moving into the house was fine. It's a lovely house.
Yeah.
And we enjoyed moving in. Within a week, Kathy's hand had been touched by something that we discussed and couldn't explain. It was just something unseen.
This is in the daylight, or was it?
Yes,
It was during the day.
Right.
Okay.
We also had hordes of flies that would appear within 2 rooms, and no matter how many times we would kill them, they would reappear.
All right, now flies can be a real problem in this part of the country in the summer, in any house, you know.
But if you have 2 or 3 or 4 within 1 room, that could be commonplace. But when you're talking over 100...
Well, this was the winter.
Yes.
And you're talking about how many?
Over 100 flies.
Over 100
at
flies.
one time. And then you'd go around and kill them. They'd be lying on the floor. You'd come back an hour later and they would be there, more of them.
Okay. There's something about green slime. What was that? On the wall in the movie, there's green slime comes out of the walls? Right? George, did that happen?
As the movie did it, not exactly, no.
Yeah.
It was more of a gelatin kind of substance that we thought the children had somehow mixed something up and spilled it around the house. The next time it happened, the kids were at school, and there was just no way to explain how it got there.
Did you all call, a contractor or a carpenter or anybody to come and look and try to...
We had several repairmen come in. Telephone repairman came 3 times because each time we would try and communicate with the priests, we would run into faulty connections. We had extreme fluctuations in the heat, between 40 and 50 degree fluctuations. 3 times the serviceman came in. One time he was there, he heard the furnace functioning, and yet there was no heat within the house. The
temperature was at 40 and your thermostat read 80.
Okay, no, but you had somebody inspect the entire heating system. Goodness knows those of us who live in the north know what can happen with heating systems in a house, especially old houses. George, there was also something about black in the toilets. The water black and making the ceramic, the bowls or whatever black.
The china itself, it wasn't in the water. The china itself turned black. And at first it was one bathroom and then another and then another. So that by the time the investigators got there, a number of them was still black. You know, it was still that way. There was never any reasonable explanation.
Did you have a plumber come in? I mean, when you first spotted
it? No, it wasn't a problem with the water. The water was clean. It was normal.
But did you invite any contractor, somebody like that, just to come say, hey, what's wrong with the toilets?
No, because
you didn't, yeah.
One of the things we found was the keyholes would ooze a black substance, which was of the same nature and appearance as that which was on the porcelain in the toilets. And when the investigative team came on March 6, 1976, the substance was still on the keyholes, and they were able to obtain samples of it because it was never in a moist condition. Right. And they wouldn't do physical damage to the door, in other words, carve out a piece of wood without our consent.
Had either of you had any experience before with the occult or the supernatural, ever before?
We didn't believe in it.
Were you afraid for your children? Why didn't you leave earlier than the 28 days if you were terrified?
Well, it was our house. First of all, we had never intended to give it up. Even after we moved out, we intended to find out what was wrong and move back in there. That's why the investigation was held, and people from different psychic research groups that at least we could check their credentials were called in and asked to come in. We've been asked many times why we stayed so long. It's very hard to remember the exact emotions or the moment why you would make a decision or why not.
But you finally did make it.
Well, by the time we left, we had lost a considerable amount of weight. Kathy was passing out quite regularly. I had lost over 26 pounds. And we were just reacting from one happening to another. We weren't really...
So you were generally shook up.
We weren't thinking, yes, as we normally would.
Jim, you played George in the movie. And you did research this and worked on it and so forth. You smiled. Do you believe them?
Do I? Yeah, when I'm sitting here with them, yes, I do. And I've watched George, and I've watched, you know, you've been an actor, David, and you kind of know how to watch for telltale signs when you're doing research and watching to people, and we also, well, you get an insight. And I can't say that looking over the story, I believe the book as it's presented totally. But sitting with these people, it's hard to deny a lot of the facts, too.
Were you
George gave up a lot of money.
Yeah. Were you
more than I
playing?
think that he would make on the book.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Why would you keep up working on this if it was terrifying and not a pleasant experience? Why don't you just leave it behind you and forget it and move on to other things?
Things of this nature happen quite frequently. And when they happen to families, no, not to us.
Yeah.
This was something we learned from the investigators and the psychics that came in. And when it happens to a family, usually they close the door and they don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And unless these things are talked about, they'll never be understood.
We went out, when the movie was being filmed, Jim, we went out to the house and talked to the couple who live in the house, or did a year ago. And they said they'd had no problems whatsoever. Everything was just fine. And they implied that this is all a big hoax.
Well, one of the things we're very happy with is 4 weeks ago, both of us were subjects of a polygraph test.
Right.
It was given by Chris Gugas and Michael Rice. And we both passed with flying colors. We were tested separately on it.
Is the movie fun?
Well, the movie's very effective, I think. And I'll tell you, when I was sent this script, and, you know, we're all at the mercy of scripts in this business, I read it. I was working on another picture, and I didn't have much time, and I read it quickly, and they wanted an answer. And I just thought, this is going to make a terrific movie. And when I called, I said, let's get involved, and the agency said, why don't you pick up the book tomorrow? And I said, oh, yeah, there's a book. And then the next day I found out it was a true story. I wasn't aware of it. And so my involvement from the beginning was really sort of naive. And I just took it as something that was going to be a wonderful movie, and it is. I didn't realize what I was getting into.
George and Kathy Lutz, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
David Lutz, living in Southern California. Weather's better out there.
Yeah.
Jim, good seeing you again.
Good seeing you, David. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll be back after these words from General Foods Kool-Aid.
So, last little tidbit about that guy, Ronnie DeFeo. One of the things he claimed during his trial was that he had heard voices, which told him to commit the murders.
Oh, so he admitted it.
So, there's that. So
I thought it was the butler.
So in December of 1975, the house is on the market, and the Lutzes, George and Kathy Lutz, are newlyweds. They have 3 kids because George had a kid and then she had 2 kids, and when they married together, all 3 of the kids lived together in their house. And they're looking for a house to buy, but you know, they don't have that much money.
Yeah, let's get that haunted place.
Apparently, the house had remained empty for 13 months after the DeFeo murders. And in December of 1975, George and Kathy find the house for sale, and they describe it as their dream home. And it was for sale for $80,000 for a 5-bedroom, 3.5-bath house. So that's a pretty damn good deal, because it's not in a bad neighborhood. It's in like a nice area of Long Island. So it's like...
Do they know what had happened?
There's conflicting accounts over whether they did or didn't know, but the Lutzes say that they did. So they say that they found out about the murder there and were like, whatever. Like, because for $80,000, they're getting this huge ass dream home and furniture. They were getting,
but they still paid money to live there.
Yeah, they still paid money to live in a house where
American currency.
Yeah, where 6 people were murdered via rifle in an incredibly spooky how did no one wake up murder, and they got furniture from that as well, like furniture from the family that had been trademark hyper murdered in this house. And they're like, for $80,000, sure, like that's a good deal.
Maybe I'll get murdered.
Yeah. The house also had a pool, a swimming pool, and a boathouse, and it was located on a canal. So it's like a really fucking nice house. I don't know, because $80,000 for that, like, I could get a priest in there to like bless it or something, you know?
Yeah,
like,
the priest is just gonna get killed.
It's right on that sea anal, though. I mean, you don't want that.
Can't trust the sea anal. So they had 3 kids. They had Daniel, age 9, Christopher, age 7, and Melissa, age 5, as well as a dog, which was a crossbreed between a Malamute and a Lab named Harry. They said when they first inspected the house that the real estate broker was like, yeah, people got fucking murdered in this house. Like when they first went in to inspect it.
It's okay, they're dead now.
And asked, and was like,
there
look,
haven't hardly been any Midas.
Look, there's been a bunch of murders in this house. Is that going to be a problem? And after they discussed it, the Lutzes were like, nah, it's no big deal. Like, they're like, nah, they're dead, fuck them. So the Lutzes move in on December 19th of 1975. And
what was widely considered to be a stupid move.
Yeah. And most of the DeFeo family's furniture was still in the house because it was included for the low price of $400 added onto the closing cost of the home, that they would get all that furniture too.
There's just like blood splatters still on everything.
Just they left the corpses in there for $13. They like just forgot to clean them out.
Kind of seems like they were just like, huh, Maybe someone will buy this place.
I feel like we're forgetting something.
We'll probably just get someone.
So we showed up. We arrested the guy who shot his family. Took his gun. The bodies. Shit.
Oh no! It's 2 weeks. It's too late. They already noticed.
Yeah.
Son.
Can't get that smell out of there now.
They just come knock on the door. Hello. So
corpse keeping. Do you have any corpses?
Bring out your dead.
Did we leave something in here? Depends. Was it dead? Yes.
No.
Then no, thank you.
So, one of George Lutz's friends heard about like what happened in the house after George was like, "Yeah, we're moving into this house. It's really nice. It's like at this location, blah blah blah." And his friend is like, "You fucking what the what? What? You got to get that house blessed." And George is like, "What? Like what is that?" Because George at the time was he described himself as a non-practicing Methodist, and his wife Kathy was a non-practicing Catholic, and she like tried to explain to him what would happen in a house blessing, like how those work.
He just walks up and goes, "Hey, yada yada yada. All right, you guys are good.
Hey, how are you? Hey, how are you?"
So George, he was friends with a Catholic priest who was named Father Ray, and he's like, "Hey,
Father Ray Romano.
Hey, Father Ray, can you come in and bless my house?" And he's like, "Of course I can." It's my Ray Romano impression.
He just like shows up, spectacle, testicle, wallet, watch, or watch wallet.
I let my mom push me around. I'm Ray Romano. Oh no. So
don't watch that show without the laugh track.
I'm gonna come in. I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna bless your house. So he goes in to the house to like bless the house, and so he's in there doing the blessing, and he says that when he arrived to perform the blessing, George and Kathy were like unpacking, and he went into the building to carry out the rites, and he said when he flicked the first holy water and began to pray, he heard a voice demand, "Get out!" Like, he described it as an incredibly deep, masculine voice.
And this is like when the priest is in there?
Yeah, well, the priest is in there. So the priest is like, "I'm going to go ahead and bless this. Get out!" And he's like,
the priest is like, "This is going to be an easy paycheck.
This is going to be an easy paycheck for Father Ray."
Never mind.
Well, I've been really down on my luck lately. I'm excited to just get in here and...
Pulls out a holy water super soaker. Oh, no, you ain't, motherfucker.
So...
I'm getting paid.
When he left the house, he didn't say this to George or Kathy at all. He was like, "I am not going to tell them about that."
What if they like bless a fire hydrant, like a fire hydrant or a fire truck, and they're just like, "Yeah, all the water in this truck is now holy. Spray it." And they just like soak the house. I think that would work.
Pull. So the whole house starts like screaming at you.
As soon as the water hits the house, it lights on fire.
Oh shit!
Was that holy water or napalm?
This is a kerosene truck. Damn it! I knew we shouldn't have let Jimmy drive.
Looks like we made some holy fire water.
So, a few days later, on December 24th of 1975, the priest calls up George and he's like, "Hey man, okay, so the reason I like took out of your house so fast was because when I was in the second floor, I was in this room, the sewing room, and this voice like screamed 'Get out!' at me, and it freaked me the fuck out." And he's like, "Look, just promise me that none of you are going to sleep in that room or stay in that room." Because
how long have they been there?
Huh?
How long have they been there since he called?
Since he went over, It's been almost a week.
So they're already living there when he shows up.
Yeah. Yeah, they were living there since they moved in on December 19th. And so he came on December 18th to do the blessing. So they were still unpacking everything as part of the moving in. And then he calls them on December 24th, which is 6 days later.
What the hell?
So he's like, look, like, don't stay in that room. Like, 6 days later, he, like, calls and tells them that.
He's like, nah, I'm not going to tell him.
It was 6 days, 6 hours, 6 minutes later.
He's like, I tell him they're totally going to stay in there.
And Kathy, this was the former bedroom of Mark and John DeFeo, the two little boys. And Kathy was like, oh, I'm just going to use it for a sewing room, so don't worry about it. It's not going to be, not like we're going to be sleeping in there.
I could see her, like, making a quilt, and it turns into, like, a Ouija board by accident. And, like, she's like, it spells out, die. And she's like, what?
And so, while this priest is telling them this stuff, but the phone call ends up being cut short by static. So he's like, look, don't sleep in that... And that's it. Like, the Lutzes said they had a ton of problems with the phones in the house, where it would, like, randomly disconnect calls. Sometimes they would get phone calls in the middle of the night, and it would just be like voices.
It would only cut out like the most important things to learn in the plot.
Yeah, the most important plot information. So,
yeah, everything's okay with the house. Just keep in mind there was a great big giant.
So here's the
keep
thing.
in mind all those
who was eating all of their.
So these people,
no survivors.
These people, you know, they're straight up fucking living in a horror movie. Like, one, because of that, like, that's like some plot shit happening to you when you miss the vital information from your priest who was performing the blessing and got screamed at. The other thing is when said priest allegedly develops a high fever and blisters on his hands similar to stigmata after having visited your house. So...
And why didn't they move out?
Well, apparently, at first, they didn't have anything weird happen. George and Kathy, like, just that priest was, like, the only thing, and they're like, he's
that priest was weird. He had, like, he had stigmata.
He looked like Ray Romano. Would you trust Ray Romano? I wouldn't listen to him.
He speaks in static and has stigmata. Like, it's fucking weirdo.
So, like, they hadn't had anything weird happen to them. But when they were later, like, questioned about it, they said it was like they were each living in a different house, because the way it affected Kathy is she was super excited. She's like thrilled to have this dream house, and it's so perfect and it's so great and all this, but George could only find problems with it. Like, the whole fucking time he's like, oh great, this needs fixing, like things that picked at his nerves. And then there was also the fact that no matter what he did in this house, he couldn't stay warm. So he would be, like, huddling up with, like, 6 blankets, like, sitting on the couch, and he's just shivering. But everyone else is fine. Like, everyone else is like, what's up, dude? Like, there's nothing, it's not that fucking cold in here. But he's, like, freezing constantly. So, I'm going to go through a few of the things that the Lutzes claimed happened to them during the course of their living in this house. The first one I have here is George would wake up at 3:15 every morning and go out to check on the boathouse, which is really weird. Like, every morning at 3:15 he would wake up, and then he would feel like the need to go check the boathouse.
Just, like, not consciously deciding to, he would just do it.
Exactly. He would just go do it. Like, wake up at 3:15, go out to check the boathouse, come back inside. Which just happened to be the estimated time of the DeFeo killings.
3:15.
3:15 a.m.
Wonder what the significance of the boathouse is.
I can tell you the significance. I can tell you the significance of 3:15 if you're interested in that.
Yeah.
So, in demonology, a lot of the things that demons do are meant to be a mockery of Christianity or a mockery of the Catholic Church or of God, etc. And what 3 is, the 3 o'clock hour, is supposed to be the hour of demons, because it is a mockery of the Holy Trinity. The holy hour being 3 in the afternoon, the evil hour being 3 at night. So, a lot of weird demonic cases and paranormal related cases have had that same phenomena where it's like at 3 o'clock people wake up. But that wasn't a widely known thing in the 70s when George had his thing. Like, now we have the internet, we can find that shit like that, but like back then nobody's like, oh, 3 o'clock, that's the demon hour, everybody knows that. So that's kind of fucking weird. And another thing that would happen is, even though it was the middle of the winter, because it's December, fucking flies would show up in the house everywhere. And it wasn't like, you know, you're eating breakfast and like a fly buzzes at your head or something. It was, they would like randomly during the day go into a room and there would be a swarm of like 100 flies covering a window, or like just like hundreds of flies in the corner of a room or things like that. And they said they would kill them with like newspapers and shit, and then come back later and there wouldn't even be any fly bodies. Like, there would be like nothing there.
I just imagine when you said they kill them with newspapers, they're just like, Reagan is president. And they're just like,
how? This is the 70s.
Just reading off news articles.
The actor. Jesus. Oh, I have made a horrible mistake. Another thing is, Kathy, she would have, like, incredibly vivid nightmares about the murders, including to the point where in her nightmares, she figured out the order in which they were killed. Literally, without that being released to the public, she had, in her dreams, the right order for how they died in the house. Like the order that the coroner determined they'd been killed. Let's see. Their kids also began sleeping on their stomachs, which is the way that the kids were found dead in the house, was sleeping on their stomachs. Which is weird, because according to the Lutzes, their kids had never been stomach sleepers before. It was only after they moved into that house that happened. Kathy would also feel a sensation as if being embraced in a loving manner by an unseen force. Which, if we know anything about anything, that's probably Lucy Liu's buddy, like, showing up, like, with chocolates or something, and ghost fellatio.
It was Bill Cosby.
Now, just put this pudding pop in your mouth real quick.
He's the worst tasting pudding I've ever had.
When was Ghost Dad made? Was he Ghost Dad at the time? Because he could have just been way too into character and been haunting them. So, yeah, she'd feel like this sensation as if she's being embraced by an unseen force. Another time, George found a small hidden room, which he said was about 4 feet by 5 feet, that was behind shelving in the basement. He said the walls were painted red, and the room did not appear to be in the blueprints of the house. He came to call the room the Red Room, and it ended up having, like, a serious effect on Harry, the dog, who, like, would not go near this fucking room. Like Harry, if he was, like, in the basement with George, and he could see that room, he'd be, like, hackles up, like, terrified.
Near
like,
which room?
The Red Room. It was in the basement. It was behind some shelving. It was just this 4 by 5 foot area where all the walls have been painted red.
Like the Black Lodge entrance.
Yeah, yeah. It's the entrance to the Black Lodge, and it freaked the hell out of the dog. The dog's like, nah, I ain't going near that shit. They would also bump into random cold spots and odors of perfume or shit throughout the house. even though there were no wind drafts. So they're like, there's no wind in here, but I just got like a serious whiff of shit. Or suddenly it smells like ladies' perfume, or things like that. So, while tending to the fireplace, George and Kathy saw the image of a demon with half of its head blown out. It was burned into the back of the soot of the fireplace. So
it's like double burned?
Yeah.
Because soot is already burned.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like in the soot in the back of the fireplace. So it's like, So, the Lutz's 5-year-old daughter, Missy, this is probably the creepiest thing to me. So, Missy, they would go and check on Missy, and she's like laughing and playing in her room and having conversations with someone who's not there. She would be, talking to like the rocking chair she had in her room. She'd be like sitting there looking at the rocking chair, talking to it like it was a person and stuff like that. And she says that it was her friend Jodie. And her friend Jodie looked like a pig-like creature with glowing red eyes, is how she described it. She's like, oh, Jodie, she's like a giant fucking demonic-looking pig with glowing red eyes. And her parents are like, okay. Like, she was, the way she described it specifically is that Jodie was a giant pig with, like, a man's hands and laser beam eyes. So...
that seems normal.
Yeah, that sounds fine. So on the early morning hours of Christmas Day of 1975, George got woken up and like at 3:15, like he always did. And at this point, he's real fucking sick of everything. Like, this has been going on for like the whole time since they've been there, like 2 weeks now. He can't get warm no matter what he does. Every night he's waking up at 3:15 and walking out to this boathouse, and he can't stop doing it. And as he's walking back from the boathouse, he looks up and he sees Missy standing in the window of her bedroom staring at him, and it's 3:15 in the morning. But behind Missy is a giant demonic cartoon pig with glowing red eyes, like standing behind her in that window. And he says it was the most terrifying thing he'd ever seen in his life. Like, imagine you go out to fucking check this boathouse at 3 in the morning. You feel like you're being watched. You look up, your little girl is standing there with a giant fucking demon pig with laser beam eyes and like wolf teeth, like standing there looking at you from the window.
And be like, hey, hey.
Hey, man, what you thinking?
Get out of there.
Get out of my house. So that's kind of fucking terrifying. He says that when he saw that thing, he ran up to her room and he found her fast asleep in her bed, but her rocking chair was just slowly going back and forth. So, he would also wake up frequently to the sound of the front door slamming. Just bang! Like, it would just wake him up, because whatever this was in this house didn't want him sleeping for shit. Like, it's like, basically like it was trying to sleep deprive him and keep him cold all the time. So he would hear this slam, and he'd run downstairs, and he'd see the dog is just sleeping in front of the front door. Like, the dog's like, yeah, whatever. Like, there's literally nothing. It was just a sound in his head. He said nobody else heard the sound, even though it was loud enough to wake, like, everybody up. Like, he said it was extremely loud, and it would happen frequently. He also, George said that he would hear what he described as a marching band tuning up, or what sounded like a clock radio playing not quite on frequency. But when he would go downstairs, the noise would stop. So,
just like a marching band tuning their instruments?
Yeah. It sounds like a fucking racket of like instruments tuning up is basically what it is. So
Just trolling him so hard.
Yeah, and then he goes downstairs and it stops. So he's like, "You goddamn marching band, get out of my..." There's no marching band in my house. For a moment, I thought there was a marching band in my house. Another thing that happened is George realized at this point that he bore a strong resemblance to Ronnie DeFeo Jr., the murderer. And when you look at the pictures of them side by side, they look almost identical. Like, they really do look a lot alike. George started going drinking at the Witch's Brew, which is a bar where DeFeo was a regular customer. Which is kind of weird. So, one night when closing Missy's window, which Missy had said that Jodie had climbed out of, Kathy, is oh, well, I'll just close this window. Closes the window, and she can see those fucking laser beam eyes out in the yard staring at her from, in the yard, and she says it terrified her. So, the little girl's like, "Oh, Jodie just went out the window. You scared her." And so the mom's like, "Oh, I didn't mean to scare her." Then closes the window, and bam, the laser beam eyes. Just fucking scary.
That's freaky.
So, let's see. One night while in bed, Kathy received red welts on her chest caused by an unseen force, and she was also levitated 2 feet in the air. So, yikes. Also, the locks, doors, and windows in the house were all, bam, damaged all of a sudden, which is weird.
That is weird.
There were also cloven hoof prints attributed to an enormous pig that was in the snow outside of their house on New Year's. They, go outside and there's fucking giant pig prints, circling their house. That's fucking weird. So, they also would find a green gelatin-like slime that had oozed out of the walls in the hall or from the keyhole of the playroom door in the attic. But the little girl also described that, Jodie would drool that, green drool. So, that's kind of spooky. They also had a 12-inch crucifix that Kathy had, hung on the wall in the living room. And they watched it spin slowly on its own until it was upside down, and then the room filled with the smell of death. So...
That's crazy.
That's probably fine. George...
I don't see the problem here.
George tripped over a 4-foot-high China lion ornament in the living room and found bite marks on one of his ankles.
How do you trip over something that's 4 feet tall? What is he, a giant?
Yeah, he's the Jolly Green Giant. I don't know. I bet Ryan would trip over something that's 4 feet tall.
No, not usually.
What would that be?
Unless I'm looking straight up.
That'd be like chest height for you, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Just fucking fall over. Your feet somehow just flip up really fast.
But he tripped over it in the living room, and then he later found bite marks on his ankle. And later the lion would reappear in the living room after George had taken it upstairs into the sewing room. So George is like, "I don't like this thing. It just tricked me. I'm gonna put it upstairs."
Is your 4-foot lion making too much noise all the time?
Was it ever?
Get lion mittens.
Are you tired of your haunted lion biting your ankles? Get lion mittens.
Are you tired of your giant demon laser-eyed pig keeping you up at night? Get demon pig goggles.
Thanks, demon pig goggles.
Just imagine he looks
You're
at you
welcome.
like the Terminator eye.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. That, like, she literally said the laser eyes is how she described it. Is he had like Jodie had laser eyes, which is spooky.
So is it a Terminator or a demon or both?
And what's crazy?
It's a
Can a Terminator be haunted?
I was just watching a documentary to like refresh my mind on all this stuff earlier today, and it was about the oldest boy, Danny. It was about his experiences in the house, which I'm gonna be honest, when I thought it was just George and Kathy Lutz talking about it all the time, like, I was like, whatever. I like never really bought into this that much, because the only people that I would ever see talk about it were actually Ed and Lorraine Warren, who I have like kind of a weird opinion of. Like, they always seem to be making money off of it, like, no matter what they...
Who are they?
You ever seen The Conjuring? Well, they're like the main couple from The Conjuring. Basically, they were a demonologist and his wife, who was a medium, who were, like, called in by the Catholic Church to investigate haunted places like this. Supposedly called in by the Catholic Church, according to them. But that's the thing, too. They're also the ones that have Annabelle the doll in their museum. They have, like, a whole museum in their house of, like, haunted shit that they found. So
they were called in by their need to make dough.
Yeah. That's my problem, is, like, they made a lot of dough off of their stuff, because they hit when the iron was hot, like, right at the perfect time to start making bank off of all this. That's my problem with the Warrens. But I was watching, like, documentary footage about, like, where it was, like, interviews with the Lutzes and stuff, and the Lutzes actually seem really believable. Like, listening to them testify about it, I don't get the impression they're lying at all. But all that is to say that their son Danny, in the documentary I was watching earlier, said that he had seen Jodie staring at him from the windows also before, when he was playing in the yard.
And the wall.
So...
Sweat.
Until sweat ran down his balls. And all these demon pigs crawled
Oink, 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 oink.
on the ceiling. Oink, 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 goddamn. So, George also one time saw Kathy transform into an old woman of 90. The hair
It's not
was
a good power to have.
the hair was a shocking white, and the face was a mass of wrinkles and ugly lines, and saliva dripping from a toothless mouth.
It took her 3 hours to put that makeup on.
So,
Watch as I transform.
The little girl and best friends with Jodie the pig, Missy, she would constantly sing to herself whenever she was in her room. But whenever she left the room, she would stop singing. But
what is she singing to herself?
But when she would go back into the room, she would start singing. But when she would go back into the room, she would start singing again from the exact spot she had stopped. Even if it had been like 2 hours earlier that she had like left the room, she would start from the same syllable that she had left the room at when she'd go back. Which is weird.
Oh. She's just like peeking around the corner, just like
Pulls out like a record table.
So,
and on that farm he had a pig.
So, on one occasion, Kathy heard what sounded like a window being opened and closed in the sewing room. She heard that through the sewing room door, even though she was sure nobody else was in the house. So the Lutzes are like, this house is fucking crazy. And so they decide to carry out a blessing of their own on the house on January 8th of 1976. And so George walked through the house with a silver crucifix while they both recited the Lord's Prayer. And while in the living room, George allegedly heard a chorus of voices asking them, "Will you stop?"
No.
And by mid-January of 1976, after another attempt at trying to bless the house by George and Kathy, they experienced what would turn out to be their final night in the house. The Lutzes still have never given a full account of what happened on that night, describing them as too frightening.
Oh, which night?
Their last night in the house. Literally, this shit happens to them, and they left. Like, they didn't take any of their stuff with them. They left their stuff in the house.
So whatever does happen on the last night, they were just like, nope.
Yeah, whatever happened on the last night, they still won't talk about because it was too scary. Yeah, and the movie, every movie has its own version of what happened on the last night, and you're like, okay. But my guess is they saw Jodie. Like, I would fucking shit myself if I saw a giant demonic cartoon pig in my living room. I would shit myself immediately.
Just like giant fucking demon pig playing Fortnite.
You just see a giant pig.
Yeah, it's like eating my pizza in the living room. I'm just like, what the fuck is that? Like, my brain would not be able to handle that.
You walk in, you walk into the house and you just see. That's all, folks. And you're just like, ah!
I totally would too. Like, fucking Porky Pig, he's a pervert. He doesn't wear pants, dude.
No pants.
No pants, ever.
Neither does Donald Duck.
Holy shit, you're right.
Or any cartoon character.
Donald Dick.
Donald Dick. Let's talk about that Donald Dick.
He's 90% dick. 2% legs.
100%
concentrated.
Remember
Concentrated power and will.
So, after that night, they, like, took off. And it ended up happening where somebody who was a friend of a friend heard about it and, like, approached the news to do a story on it. And so George had to, like, answer questions, and from there they got put on, like they were like, look, we want to live our lives and shit, but they were being hounded by news reporters and, like, all the tabloid magazines and like daytime television shows and stuff like that. And they eventually published their account of everything that happened in that book, the Amityville Horror, which gets turned into a movie, which gets turned into 11 movies. But even despite that, the Lutzes say that they, like, when they released their finances to show, like, because people for years were like, they made this up for money, they've only ever made $300,000 off of it, including multiple books, 11 movies, like, all that stuff.
I don't get paid shit.
So yeah, they didn't make shit off of this.
The royalties just go to the demon pig.
Yeah, I'll go to the demon pig, just rolling around in money, like spitting up green shit everywhere for some reason.
It's just liquefied money.
But
he just lives on a giant pile of money like Smog.
Long-legged beasties and things that go bump in the night. Good Lord, deliver us. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Seekers of the Supernatural. I'm your moderator, Tony Spera, with hosts Ed and Lorraine Warren. Tonight's program will be an exciting one, and it will include ghosties and beasties and things that go bump in the night. Tonight we're going to be speaking about one of the most horrific cases that the Warrens have ever investigated, the Amityville Horror. Now, Ed, can you tell me how you and Lorraine got involved in the Amityville Horror?
Well, it was Marvin Scott from Channel 5 news team. He was the anchorman at the time, and he had been involved with a haunting that we had investigated in Bloomfield, New Jersey, and he was impressed by this. So he gave us a ring and he said, we'd like you to come down and see what's going on in Amityville, Long Island. Now, this was not the Amityville horror case at that time, you understand? This was just another haunted house, and we didn't even realize that 6 people had been murdered in that house of the Fayol family. So we said, sure, we'd come down there, and we did. And that was the beginning of an adventure which we'll never forget, a supernatural adventure. When we went into the house that day, we didn't realize that it was diabolically infested. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I would have to say that Amityville was a 10. I want to make it clear at the beginning of this program that Lorraine and I do not back up the movie or the book. It was much more horrific than either. You didn't have to take a literary license in a book or dramatic license in a movie. This case had everything. It had the monstrosities of the night which roamed that house, which infested it, which caused a young man to murder his whole family. Ronald DeFeo is now serving 6 consecutive life sentences at Dannemora Prison. But you know, Amityville horror goes way back before the Lutz family, who moved in there and bought the house later, and were fled 28 days later. It goes back 6 months before the DeFeos were murdered. Mr. DeFeo went up to Montreal, Canada. He went to a shrine where many miracles had occurred. A lot of people don't know this. He went to that shrine and he brought back from there a priest, an exorcist, who said masses in the house. Why? If this was a hoax that was created by the Lutz family, why 6 months before this man was murdered and his family was an exorcist in that house? While the priest was saying a mass and performed the exorcism rituals, candles were blowing out, doors were opening and closing. There were footsteps all around the house. Ronald DeFeo, who was the murderer of his family, fled the house. He didn't stay there. He did not want to stay there while the priest was in that house. What caused him to leave? Obsession? Possession? Who can say? We do know that this young man did murder every member of his family in that house, shot them to death. On November 13th, 1974, at 3:15 in the morning. He had a high-powered rifle. Now, when you see the photographs later, and these are the only pictures ever taken inside the Amityville horror house, because Lorraine and I and just a handful of other investigators actually went in there. I've heard people on TV say, I was in that house, I investigated. They never were. They don't have any evidence, they have no proof. We have the proof, and you'll see that proof tonight. They will see the only photographs ever taken in the house itself at the time of the investigation, and as the Lutzes left that home, completely furnished, they didn't take one thing with them. They left everything there, and they went off to California, because Father Pecoraro, who many people said did not exist, talked with Lorraine and I. He told us all the horrible things that happened to him. We sat with him. He was as close as I am to you, Tony, at dinner at Kathy Lutz's mother's home in Deer Park. He told me things that the public has never heard about. And tonight, we are going to endeavor to explain what really happened in that home.
Okay, Lorraine, I know you went in the house and you experienced things, but can we just go over how you first were called into the house? Like, who was the gentleman or people that called you in? Was it the Lutzes that called you in?
No, it was not, Tony. It was Marvin Scott who called us in. He told us there had been a tragedy in that home. He didn't go into detail regarding it. He told us that it was a prominent family. He also told us during that very first conversation that the family that were living there at the present time had fled and left all of their possessions behind. And their viewers were very interested in the history of that house and what exactly might be wrong with the home. That's how we first became involved. Now, I had to tell Marvin Scott at that time that there was no way that we could go in that home without an invitation and permission from the family, which came very readily. But realize, when we met with George Lutz, not Kathy, because Kathy and the children were not there. When we met with George, he wouldn't go anywhere near the house. He met us at a pizza parlor and sat with us and talked because he was so frightened
Well, I understand that George wasn't really he was a no-nonsense kind of a guy,
He was
right?
really a no-nonsense man.
George Lutz was an ex-Marine. He was a karate expert. He ran around with motorcycle gangs. We're not talking about any altar boy here. We're talking about a rough, tough guy who, after 28 days in that house, fled, left everything behind, took his wife and children, and went off to California.
See, he was the type of person, Tony, that felt like he had to always be in control. He would go out on the landings. It was 3 stories high. The home is very beautiful. The interior of the home is very formal and it's very beautiful. And he would go out and he would take his fist and he would tell what was there, or command what was there to come out so he could fight it. Because as far as he was concerned, he was very skeptical regarding the fact that anything paranormal was going on. At the time that this first began, he found it difficult because of his background to even believe in a God, never mind believe that something of this nature was taking place. But I have to say this, the Amityville case affected our personal lives more than any case we ever worked on.
Really?
It was, yes.
How? What way?
Well, it was to find.
My name is Tony Spera. I'll be your moderator tonight, along with Ed and Lorraine Warren. Last show we spoke of the Amityville Horror in our Part 1 series. We delved more or less, Ed, into the history of Amityville, to the background of the house. But tonight I think what we'd like to do is speak more of the phenomena that actually occurred in the home. So can we begin, Ed, with some of the phenomena that did actually occur at 112 Ocean Avenue?
Okay, in the beginning, George and Kathy would feel the psychic cold throughout all the rooms. No matter how many logs they'd throw on a fire, it was icy cold. That's because it's a psychic cold, and the cold is being drawn. The heat from the bodies of the people in that house is being drawn, and that heat is going to be used as an energy fuel source for the spirits in that house. So they'd feel the psychic cold. They'd hear magic whispering, voices throughout the hallways. At night, they would see ghost lights over their beds in the rooms. There was a time when George and Kathy found themselves about 2 foot from the ceiling. George looked over at Kathy and said, "Do you believe this? Do you believe it?" And of course, then they went to lower themselves down into the bed again. But there would be the footsteps. There would be the slime that they would find on the staircase. Now, these are called apports. These materialize or dematerialize in such haunted houses. For instance, in many homes that we go into, we will find that you might see blood, as they did, coming down the wall. But if you went over there and touched that wall, there'd be no blood. This is a telepathic projection to the viewer, and it bypasses the physical eye, goes into the mind's eye, and they see it as a medium would see it. There was the marching band, as they described it, around 3:15 in the morning when the murders had taken place. A lot of things would happen at around 3 o'clock. We call this the devil's hour because it's an insult to the Trinity, anything that comes in threes. They would hear this marching band. George would jump out of bed. He'd go running down the stairs. As soon as he'd get down to the foyer, the music would stop. But he'd look into the living room, that huge living room, which you'll see a picture of, and the rugs were actually rolled up and the furniture was pushed over to the sides of the walls as though somebody were actually marching there. There were so much different types of phenomena that occurred to us and the people that went in there. It was incredible. I told you about the experience last week of where I felt as I was being smothered. Going into that home again, Lorraine felt many things. She, as a clairvoyant, would be more sensitive. Mary Pasquarella, who was the director of the Psychic Research Institute in Hamden, Connecticut, never went into a haunted house after that. She gave up the work because she was so badly affected by it. The cameraman that went in there with Channel 5 news team had heart palpitations. These guys, they were in battles in World War II. Of course, it bothered them, but never as much as going into that house there.
Well, it was the physical effects on their body, Tony, that was bothering them. And then one of the scientists that had come up from Duke University, he became so terrified in this home, and the chair that he was sitting on actually went right backwards with him in it. They had a real hard time just stabilizing him emotionally in that home. But it seemed like, and it's true to the fact that people are affected on their weakest, most vulnerable levels. And I think many times people of science go into a home like this not really expecting to be affected personally, just to be there and be witness to it. But they have nothing to fall back on. They have no faith, Tony. They can't call on any inner strength other than their own personal knowledge.
Right.
And in a way that, as far as I'm concerned, they can't possibly be too objective that way.
You know, Father Pecoraro told me about an experience he had when he left the house. He went back to his rectory. He was up in his room. Suddenly the room became icy cold. Ghost lights were shooting all over the place, and a deep, harsh, growling voice occurred in that room. He's seen what he described as a lizard-like creature. Now, as a demonologist, I have seen diabolical. In fact, at one time, I had seen 43 of them. I knew exactly what he was talking about. It's something that you can't describe to anybody. It's something that's from another world. And as he described that, you could see the terror in this man's face. He wasn't used to these types of things. And the same thing happened to him again in a hotel room in Florida with a rabbi. The both of them experienced this. And when this lizard-like creature appeared in that room to these two men, and it finally faded, the glass in the windows turned red.
Now, speaking of the clergy, Lorraine, you had mentioned before, and I think we're going to see a slide of him, you have mentioned Padre Pio from Italy, who I believe was a Franciscan
Yes,
monk.
he was. He was a Franciscan monk.
I think we're going to have a shot of him coming up. Now, if we could get that slide.
Stigmata.
Yes, here it is right
Yes.
here. Can you explain, Ed, what we're looking at here? And Lorraine, either one of you.
He suffered the wounds of Christ, Tony, for 50 years of his life, which meant that he bled just as Christ bled on the cross.
So did he bleed from his feet also?
Yes, he did. Yes. But
Now, the incredible thing was that 10 minutes after this man died, 10 minutes, all of these wounds disappeared.
They all were healed, Tony. Yes.
There were the critics who would say, well, the man did this to himself. After he was dead, he couldn't do anything to himself. And these wounds simply disappeared.
Okay, here's a close-up.
Okay, now,
Here's a close-up of Padre Pio.
Look at this close-up. Look at this profile.
If we could go back a little further and see the hood.
If we could.
So another couple quick facts here. The house used to be 112 Ocean Avenue, but they've changed it to 108 Ocean Avenue because they're trying to keep tourists from coming and looking at it and shit. Another thing is that the Lutzes, all told, only lived in the house for 28 days.
28 days?
28 days. So all of this happened in literally 4 weeks. It's just fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Let's see. They said, when we left, we didn't know we weren't coming back. We didn't know that we were leaving, what we were leaving behind, we would never see again. We didn't know that they said they ended up packing up their bags at Kathy's mother's house and leaving the rest of their shit in the house to be auctioned. So they were like, fuck that.
Yeah.
So there's a few theories as to what the deal could be with the Amityville house. One is that it's bullshit and they made it up for money, which I'm not sure what kind of like genius comes up with blowing like $80,000 on a house so that they can claim that it's haunted, so that they might get a book deal at some point talking about their haunted house. Like, what kind of, like, get-rich-quick scheme that is. Like...
It was the best one they had.
Yeah. So, I'm like...
Everyone was already, like, out of pyramids.
And so, also, Ronnie DeFeo claimed that he had been... later claimed that he had been possessed when he committed the murders.
He's like, I was...
After this book came out.
Demon.
He was like, I was possessed by a demon, that's it. And then later he changed that confession to another one, which is that his sister had committed the murders and that he had only killed her. Which, like, still wouldn't explain how everyone slept through being murdered. And she just, like, went back to bed so he could kill her again later. I don't know. The weirdest thing to me about the DeFeo thing, though, is that, like, nobody woke up and they were all, like, in the same position in bed. Like, when they died, they were all, like, laying in the same exact position in bed. What's your theory, Palmer, about the Amityville?
I think it was all made up so Ocean Avenue could come out with a song about it. Or Yellow Card coming out with Ocean Avenue, dude.
Is that about Amityville?
I don't know. That's all I kept thinking when he said Ocean Avenue. I'm sitting there going, on the corner of Cherry Street.
God, I don't remember that band for shit. I think they had like a trumpet player for some reason.
I don't know.
That's a weird band.
We were both 18 and it just felt so right. Sleeping all day, staying up all night.
So, what do you think, Ryan?
So, how come none of the movies have been any good?
Yeah, for real.
That's like a pretty damn crazy plot.
Yeah, but the movies always, like, try to embellish stuff more and make it, like, crazier. They're like, the walls have blood and stuff like that, and you're like, okay, but, like, but a demon pig, though? That thing is legit scary. Like, you're finding hoof prints in your yard? Like,
laser eyes?
Yeah, laser eyes and hoof prints.
You don't know if it's a demon, if it's a Terminator, if it's both. That's terrifying.
I would stay there for 4 weeks.
Would you?
Why did they pay $80,000 for that house, though?
Yeah.
Why would you pay?
Well, because then they would make up the story that it's haunted and then sell it for more.
Here's another thing, though. They fled after less than a month, so they ended up being foreclosed on because they never even made a mortgage payment on it because of that. But they still would have had to make the down payment, get the loan from the bank, and ruin their credit and all that stuff. So, as like part of their plan to get rich off of a book for some reason.
Do you think the bank was behind this?
I know the bank was behind this. So yeah, that's pretty I don't know. I honestly, when I first started researching this, I went into it assuming it was bullshit. I really did, because I have this thing with Ed and Lorraine Warren where I want to believe them, but they like love themselves so much that it makes it really difficult for me not to just immediately assume that they're full of shit. But I had never heard the family testimony and never heard them talk about it and stuff like that until I started doing the research, and I went, they seem really credible. Like, they don't seem like, when you're listening to their interviews, they don't seem like they're just bullshitting off the top of their head. Like, when the guy goes to describe the cartoon demon pig that he saw in the window, he's like, I saw it was a cartoon pig with wolf teeth and the laser eyes, and I'm like, that is fucking crazy, because if, like, that's how I would describe it if I had to, because that would be so fucking hard to, like, say without immediately assuming people are going to think you're crazy.
Yeah.
If, like, you saw something like that. Like, I would think everyone would think I was fucking crazy. And that fucking pig scares the shit out of me. Like, in this story. Like, that rings, like, more true than anything else. And I'm just like, yikes. But,
I like this rendering. It's like, what if the house was the pig?
Oh, man. Yeah, that's fucking spooky. This is, based on, like, the witness testimony of what Jodie looked like. And so is this here. Yeah. Can you imagine coming home to that fucking thing sitting there? But I will share this on the Twitter and shit too. But I wanted to show you guys this first off. When I was looking for, like, pictures and shit from this, the Warrens have this really famous picture, which is called, like, the Demon Boy or something like that, which they said that they got in the Amityville house.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, we took this picture in the Amityville house. So, the little boy in the picture looks like the littlest boy of the DeFeos who was murdered. But I have seen this picture a million times. It's a really fucking spooky picture.
Mm-hmm.
Like this kid down here. But what I had never noticed before until I pulled it up on my computer today and zoomed in at the doorway behind that kid, that looks...
Can you not knock my drink off the table?
I could try. Look up there in this...
Looks like a spider.
In the top part there. Like the top part of the doorway. What freaked me out is, to me, it looks like a pig snout and the two eyes and the, like, crooked mouth with the sharp teeth. That's what it looks like to me. And I was like, that is fucking terrifying that is, like, right there behind that kid. This, like, ghost kid with laser eyes. The ghost kid has laser eyes.
That is true.
If I was going to say he had anything, I would describe those as laser eyes. But I'll share this picture on our Twitter and our Facebook and shit. Maybe Instagram, if I can figure out the password to our Instagram.
Put that on our Snapchat.
Put it on Snapchat, and it's fucking spooky, man.
Put that up on our Quibbles.
So, what do you think, Ryan? Yes or no? Do you believe in the Amityville haunting?
Let me put it like this. I ain't fucking staying a night in that place.
I wouldn't stay there either, man.
And if I did, we'd be eating bacon for breakfast.
And sausage for dinner. And, like, pork loin for lunch.
Because it's a big pig.
I'll show him. It's a giant pig with, like, man knuckles, which is weird. What do you think, Palmer? Do you believe the Amityville?
Let me put it like this. No.
So, I believe it, personally. I used to think it was bullshit, but after researching it, I'm sold. I'm like, yeah, that's fucking spooky. That's some scary shit. And if I fucking see a demon pig around my house, I'll kill it. I don't fuck with that. So,
cut some bacon off his back.
So, you guys got any shout outs this week?
My shout out this week is Jodie. My boy.
Please don't haunt me.
If you do, I'm gonna eat you.
You're real fucking spooky. What about you, Palmer? You got a shout out this week?
Amy.
No.
Amy.
I got a shout out this week to our buddy Jerkin. Do you remember him? He had the shrimp that had the land speed record for shrimp. He sent us that story about the shrimp. He's like on the motorcycle going super fast.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, you guys are fucking... So, yeah, my shout out... I guess my shout out is to him.
I'm pretty sure I would have remembered you calling someone jerkin.
Who's jerkin? Like
his
like a leather jerkin
I am.
that you wear?
Constantly. So my shout out is to him
Thanks,
because his fucking cat died. His cat Hazelnut, and he was sad about it and wanted us to shout out about it. And instead, we're making fun of his name.
Jerkin's cat is named Hazelnut.
Hazelnut.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just checking.
So yeah, sorry about that, Jerkin. But so if you have any weird stories,
wait, just let me get this straight. We did a story where this dude Jerkin was being chased on a motorcycle
with shrimp
by land shrimp.
No, he had shrimp, and he was being chased by a crazy person in a car.
Who was the shrimp?
The shrimp were in the bag of shrimp that he was carrying. They were like live shrimp that he got from a fish place.
And they had polio.
Yeah. If you got any weird stories, you can email us at weirdshitpodcast@gmail.com. You can buy our merch at weirdshitpodcast.threadless.com. You can buy our merch at weirdshitpodcast.cafepress.com. You can follow us on Twitter, sign up for our Patronus, etc., etc. Got this shit on YouTube.
Head up our Quimbles.
What's a Quimbles? Do you run our Quimbles?
It's my new social media app. It's coming out. It's dropping in 30-35.
It's going to be fire. It's going to be fire. So we'll see y'all next week.
Check us out on Facebook.
Peace.
There's a storm outside which only we can hear in the house. And the wind is raging, but the lights stay on, thank God. They won't off, they're wind. We've brought Harry up and tied him to the bedroom door. Because he was useless at the front door. You'd hear the front door slam in the middle of the night. It was a very distinct sound. And he'd be asleep right at the front door. So I figured, okay, we'll bring him up upstairs. After the stuff that went on the night before, the screams and all the different things that went on, we wanted to have him right there with us. Earlier that day, Kathy had turned into an old woman. She had scratches across her stomach. And during that night, she actually lifted up a little bit off the bed, about 3-4 inches, and started to slide away from me, and I grabbed her before she went off the bed. At one point, I kind of sat up and let out 2 distinct sounds at the same time. And I knew when it was happening, it couldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be able to do this physically. One was what I described as a low moaning wail. It was from deep within inside me. What I would maybe try to describe as the core of me. Not the conscious person that walks around talking. And at the same time I was saying the words, "It's in Chris's room, it's in Chris's room." But I couldn't get up off the bed. I could not get out of bed and go up there. Overhead at one point, the boys' beds you can hear them, they're being lifted up and slammed down on the floor over us. But I still could not get up. And Kathy wouldn't wake up. Harry is walking in circles, puking, laying down, walking in circles, puking. And there's no getting up to help him. When that one night was over, I was unable to communicate to anyone else in a rational way what had gone on, what we had experienced. The boys came down the next morning and they still talk of this very occasionally, but they do, about what went on for them, what they saw, what happened up there. And that's their story, and I won't tell you that. That's for them to do. They're adults now. But that was the end for me in terms of I'm not afraid of this, or I can deal with this. I knew then I could not deal with this. So you asked for it, that was it. Now you know why I don't do that. because you relive a part of it when you talk about it too. And it's not the easiest thing to even admit to yourself still. You know, what do you mean there's something you can't figure out?
There's a storm outside which only we can hear in the house. And the wind is raging, but the lights stay on, thank God. Oh my, never went off, never blinked. We brought Harry up and tied him to the bedroom door. Because he was useless at the front door. You'd hear the front door slam in the middle of the night. It was a very distinct sound. And he'd be asleep right out the front door. So I figured, okay, we'll bring him up upstairs. After the stuff that went on the night before, the screams and all the different things that went on, we wanted to have him right there with us. Earlier that day, Kathy had turned into an old woman. She had scratches across her stomach. And during that night, she actually lifted up a little bit off the bed, about 3-4 inches, and started to slide away from me, and I grabbed her before she went off the end. At one point, I kind of sat up and let out 2 distinct sounds at the same time. And I knew when it was happening, it couldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. You shouldn't be able to do this physically. One was what I described as a low moaning wail. It was from deep within inside of me. What I would maybe try to describe as the core of me. Not the conscious person that walks around talking. And at the same time I was saying the words, it's in Chris's room, it's in Chris's room. But I couldn't get up off the bed. I could not get out of bed and go up there. Overhead, at one point, the boys' beds you can hear them. They're being lifted up and slammed down on the floor over us. But I still could not get up. And Kathy wouldn't wake up. Harry is walking in circles, puking, laying down, walking in circles and puking. And there's no getting up to help him. When that one night was over, I was unable to communicate to anyone else in a rational way what had gone on, what we had experienced. The boys came down the next morning, and they still talk of this very occasionally, but they do, about what went on for them, what they saw, what happened up there. And that's their story, and I won't tell you that. That's for them to do. They're adults now. But that was the end for me in terms of I'm not afraid of this, or I can deal with this. I knew then I could not deal with this. So you asked for it, that was it. Now you know why I don't do that. Because you relive a part of it when you talk about it too, and it's not the easiest thing to even admit to yourself still. You know, what do you mean there's something you can't figure out?
Man, that episode was dope. You know what else would be dope? If you guys told us your paranormal stories. I know some of you have seen ghosts, some of you have seen fucking UFOs, some of you have seen Bigfoot. If you write into us, we have an email. It is weirdshitpodcast@gmail.com. We really want to read you guys' emails. If you want to just give us a shout out, you can give us a shout out. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to record a voice message, I want to start putting voice shout outs at the beginning of every episode now. So if you send us those, that would be fucking dope. We have the Google Voice number. If you'd rather call up and leave us a voicemail, you can tell us your story that way. Send us some positivity, man. Keep the positivity coming. It's the number for that is 919-346-3071. That's 919-346 3071. We also have a Facebook group, the Weird Shit Podcast official Facebook group. We're on there all the time. We're posting memes. We want to talk to you guys. Fucking tweet at us. Fucking Facebook us. Fucking email us, man, because we love to hear from you and we want to keep doing this forever.
Hello, my darlings. I'm Sammy, the host of Encrypted. Every 2 weeks, I will bring you stories of mystery, true crime, and creepy. You can find me on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Do you have a story? I would love to hear it. You can go to the Encrypted Podcast discussion group on Facebook. On Twitter, you can find us at EncryptedPod. Or you can go to accproductions.org/encrypted. Don't forget to lock your doors and hold tight to your flashlight.
Hey guys, I'm Nick.
And I'm Joe. And we are the Fringe Boys.
The hosts of Cast into the Fringe, a weekly dive into time travel,
aliens,
conspiracies,
nerdy virgins,
and many other strange things the government doesn't want you to know.
Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Cast into the Fringe.
And check out our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and SoundCloud.
Hi, this is Jim.
And this is Annabelle.
Together, we bring you the Forgotten News Podcast.
We tell true stories from long ago. Stories from before you were born. Stories that made headlines for a week or a month, then vanished, just as suddenly. We look for these long-lost stories, then brush off the dust and share them with you, as fresh as the day they were first told.
One thing we definitely promise you, the stories you will hear will always be a surprise, and it will be a true story.
It might be a crime story. It might be a strange or spooky story. It might be a funny story.
If you are someone who might like to hear lost stories like these, then you should definitely listen to the Forgotten News Podcast.
The Forgotten News Podcast is available on iTunes, also known as Apple Podcasts, as well as Google Play, Podbay, Player FM, and nearly every app for listening to podcasts.
I don't know what else to say, except be sure to listen to the Forgotten News Podcast.
Hey everybody, this is Steven.
And this is Chris.
And we're the hosts of the brand new podcast, Is This Adulting?
Every week, we're going to sit down to have a discussion about life, culture, our own mental health struggles, and just about anything you can think of.
Have you ever wondered which breakfast cereal's the best?
Or how to help your friends who are dealing with mental illness?
Or why waterbeds were a thing?
If you answered yes to any of these questions, then have we got a show for you.
And remember, kids, be happy, stay healthy, and go hug someone.
Because you never know. They might just be starting a podcast.
Oh, hey there. I didn't see you. I'm Sarah, the host of the Salty Canadian podcast. You want a podcast that is full of fun, rants, reviews, and just random stuff? Then this is a podcast for you. We can be found on any podcast catcher, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and have a great day. Eh?
Hey everybody, Mike here. I just want to take a second to talk to you about our Patreon we have set up at www.patreon.com/weirdshitpodcast. Basically, Patreon is a way where fans and listeners like yourselves can choose an amount every month to donate towards the show. Your donations will be put towards buying new equipment. It'll be put towards buying munchies because fucking Palmer is insatiable. It'll be put towards helping us pay our dues for hosting the show and for keeping the websites going. And honestly, the main thing it'll help us do is let me take more time to do more research on these topics. I have a full-time job. I work 60 hours a week, and then I spend 40 hours doing research for you guys because I love this show and I want to give you the best thing I possibly can. So if you have anything you want to give us, if you think we deserve anything for that work, feel free to go to Patreon and donate whatever you can. If not, man, it's cool. Like, I love every single one of you, and I'm so glad you're listening. Just share the show with whoever you think would be interested, and we'd love to hear from you. Thanks.